Dear students, hope you're fine. Today I'll give a very brief explanation about the history of GST in India. You've got your paper in indirect tax law and your exam is coming very soon. So I'll make a very brief video so that you can just catch hold of the concept of history of GST in India. You all know that GST was introduced in India on 1st of July 2017. But there is a background history, and the history started from the year 2000 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister of India. So let us discuss about the history, and before that, exactly what is GST? Let's say one or two lines about what is GST. See, goods and service tax is a single tax levied on goods and services, and starting from the stage of manufacturing up to the stage of consumption, and eliminating all other indirect taxes. It subsumes many other indirect taxes. Before 2017, there are almost 16, 17 types of indirect taxes, and all these indirect taxes have been replaced by GST. One or two indirect taxes are still there, but these are replaced, and GST has come to take the place. And the implementation of GST, you can write, is the biggest indirect tax reform in India. Indirect tax reform in India in the recent history of Indian economy. The GST, introduction of GST, is the biggest indirect tax reforms. Remember, one of the biggest indirect tax reforms. But at the same time, we should remember that GST was first introduced in France in 1954. That you remember. GST was first introduced where? In France in 1954. That may be a short question for you, 54. And if you think of Malaysia, it was introduced in 2015. And in India, 1st July 2017. I am just repeating the same thing. And we are having dual tax structure in India, just like Canada. And we shall discuss about it. And one thing you remember, even short note comes for that. Before GST was introduced in India, already 160 countries had already introduced GST in the world. And 161st country is India to have introduced GST. Now, this GST, who introduced the bill in India? Let's just remember, it was in 2014 when BJP government came to the power. At that time, the finance minister was Mr. Arun Jaitley. He is not there now. He introduced Constitution Amendment Bill in the Parliament in 2014. And I'll go to the history after some time. History. In May 2015, the 122nd Amendment Bill was passed in the Lok Sabha. Then, the integrated, several acts had to be passed. These acts are integrated GST bill. These bills were introduced. So many bills are there. Integrated GST, IGST Bill 2017. Union Territory GST Bill 2017. Then Central GST Bill 2017. And GST Compensation to States Bill 2017. And these were passed in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha on 20th April of 2017. All these sub-acts were passed. And on 1st of July 2017, GST was officially rolled out in India. All of you know, but I'm talking today about the background history, how GST was introduced in India. So the background history starts from the year 2000. That you remember, 2000, in the year 2000, not 2017. The story started from year 2000, when was the Prime Minister? Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Yes, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. He made an empowered committee and of the ministers, finance ministers of the different states who had already experience of dealing with VAT, value-added tax. So those ministers were put together and made a committee. And before that, one thing you remember, that Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, he requested Asim Dasgupta, finance minister of West Bengal, to make some preliminary studies also. So his name also comes in the history. And the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Committee was formed in 2004. And the committee recommended introduced of GST in 2004 only, starting from 2000. But we know it was not done, but the history starts from 2000. In the year 2006 and 7, Union Finance Minister, in his budget speech, said that GST would be introduced from 1st April 2010. So GST was supposed to be introduced in India from 1st April 2010, but it was not done. But you write in the history. And however, various regions, introduction of GST had to be pushed further. GST was not introduced in 2010, all of you know. The Constitution Amendment Bill 115th Amendment Bill 2011 was introduced in Parliament. Then what happened? This bill was introduced to incorporate certain provisions of GST and examined in detail by a standing committee. They made a standing committee. I'm talking about 2010. 115th Amendment Bill was introduced in the Parliament. But in 2014, what happens? 2014, the Parliament was dissolved. Lok Sabha was dissolved and the new government came, thus warranting the need for new constitutional amendment bill. The new constitutional amendment bill was necessary from 2014. So thus you see that the history starts from the year 2000 itself. In 2000, an empowered committee consisting of state finance ministers set up by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. Because these ministers had, experience of dealing with VAT, value-added tax. And VAT, GST, there are some differences, but GST is an improved form of VAT, you can say. Sometimes there may be question, what are the distinguishing points? What are the distinction between VAT and GST? That is also very important. Maybe I'll be taking up in some other video. So 2000 is the year when GST implementation process started in India. Remember, I'm telling time and again. And then in 2006, the then Finance Minister P. Chidambaram announced the implementation of GST from 1st April 2010. So in 2006, it was announced by the Finance Minister P. Chidambaram that GST will be implemented in India from 1st April 2010. We know it was not done. Then in 2009, an empowered committee of the State Finance Minister submitted the first discussion paper on GST. I told you that Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, he made an empowered committee of the State Finance Ministers who had experience of dealing with VAT. So this empowered committee submitted the first discussion paper on GST in India in 2009. Then in 2010, what happened? GST was supposed to be introduced from 1st April 2010, as I told you, announced by Finance Minister P. Chidambaram. But what happened in 2010? Pranab Mukherjee, the president, he announced delay in introducing GST for several reasons are there. And he proposed that let it be introduced in India after 1 year, means April 2011. So GST was supposed to be introduced in India from April 2011, but it was not done. So in what happened in 2011, let me give you the timeline. The Constitution Amendment Bill, 115th Constitution Amendment Bill is focused on introduction of GST in India and was introduced in Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha then refers the bill to the Standing Committee on Finance for a detailed examination. And then 2013, what happened? The Standing Committee on Finance submits a report to the Constitution Bill on 115th Amendment Bill. In 2013, they again gave a report. And in 2014, what happens? The government changed. Lok Sabha was dissolved. Then GST was getting some hurdles to be implemented. Then in 2014, you remember, 122nd Amendment Bill was introduced in Lok Sabha, which focused on the introduction of GST. 122nd Amendment Bill. And many people confused about the Amendment Bill 122nd or 101. So I'll be telling you that. Then in 2015, the bill was passed in Lok Sabha and referred to a select committee in Rajya Sabha. Again, it was given to a select committee in Rajya Sabha so that they can discuss and find out whether GST can be introduced and how it can be introduced and when it can be introduced. The select committee submits a report in 2015. And the economic advisor-led committee submits a report on possible GST rates. It was in 2015 only. Possible GST rates. What may be the rates of GST? What will be the rates of goods? What will be the rates of GST on services? And there are a huge number of goods and services used by the people in the country. So which item of goods will be having what rate? Which item of service will be having what rate? The proposed rates were submitted in 2015 by the Chief Economic Advisor-led committee. In 2016, what happened? The bill was passed in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and then notified as Constitution 101 Amendment Bill. 101st, you can say, 101st. So 100 Amendment Bill, it was passed. So don't get confused about 122nd Amendment Bill and 101st. Because when bills are submitted, this is a list of bills submitted, bills presented, but all of the bills may not be passed. So if you find the list of the bills submitted, on the amendment bill submitted, is 122nd, but if you find the list of the amendment bills passed, it is 101st. So please don't get confused about the amendment bill 101st and 122nd. And remember, in 2016, there was the necessity, because you are overhauling all the tax laws in the country, and something new tax laws are coming, changing the constitution, so amending the constitution. And in that juncture, approval of at least 50% of the state governments was necessary, is always necessary. So the central government requested state governments to give approval, and at that moment, Assam is the first state who gave the approval. So remember, Assam is the first state who gave the, it's a ratification. Assam is the first state who gave ratification, and then many other states gave. And when it was more than 50%, then it was accepted. It was passed. Union Cabinet approves the setting of a GST Council. And in 2016 only, you see, government cannot do itself the work. There should be some committee. And GST committee, no, it says GST Council. The GST Council is a committee which was formed by the Union Cabinet in 2016 only. I'll be making separate video about GST Council. And in GST Council, Union Finance Minister is the chairperson, and other finance minister of the different states are the members. Like that, I'll be dealing up. This GST Council deals with what will be the rate of GST, how to collect the GST, all these things. What will be the policy, all these things GST Council does. In 2017, then it came 2017. Okay, remember, GST Council had several meetings, and the first meeting was held in New Delhi. Remember, 23rd meeting was held, just to remember, in Radisson Blue Hotel of Guwahati. And several meetings were there. In Srinagar, in May 18 and 19, 2 meetings were held to determine the tax rates on goods and services. I'll be taking up this later on. Then in 2017, what happened? I told you several bills were introduced. CGST bill, IGST bill, UTGST bill, and GST compensation to stage bill. All these bills were introduced in the Lok Sabha in 2017. The bills passed by the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, after which GST acts were notified. And all these bills were passed both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And then GST Council notifies the rates of and cess on goods and services in the meeting of Srinagar in 18 and 19th of May 2017. The rates of goods and services that we find now are determined by the GST Council in the meeting in Srinagar on 18 and 19th of May 2017. And ultimately on 1st July 2017, GST rolled out in India. GST was enforced in India. So thus there's a big history of how GST was introduced in India. You remember, GST process of introduction, process of implementation started in the year 2000, and it took 17 years to introduce GST in India. Like this, Sri Lanka took 26 years, and many other countries take some time for introduction of GST in the country. And in almost all the countries, when GST is supposed to be introduced, there are a lot of oppositions, a lot of resistance, and ultimately all resistance are solved and GST comes into force. And I have not found any country where GST once introduced is abolished. No country. Once introduced, it goes on. Why? Because it may be due to the fact that GST has some inherent quality, some power, some benefits for which every country accepts it ultimately. And GST is not if you ask me who introduced in India, I'll say it's not an agenda, not only an agenda of the government of Congress, BJP, anything like that. It is not even an agenda of the people. But what I feel, when I've studied several countries, GST introduction in several countries, I found GST is, an economic evolution. And no country can abolish it. No country can avoid it, ignore it, because it has some inherent power. And for that power, GST is being introduced all over the world. And most of the countries have already introduced. Maybe some few countries not yet introduced, but this will be coming under GST. And thank you very much. Please subscribe the channel, because I make a lot of videos, academic and cultural and sports related, yoga, etc., music. And you please subscribe, and the video which is relevant to you, you can click and watch it. So I'll be making more such videos in indirect tax laws, and thank you very much. Stay blessed always, stay fit always, stay happy always. Thank you very much.